What's going on, everyone? Welcome back along to the channel. We have just 4 teams left in Super Rugby. It's time to have a look at the semi-finals coming up this weekend in the Super Rugby preview show. As always, once again, we're having some guests to have a look at their views as well. We'll be meeting up with those guys in just a second. But as always, first things first, let's have a look at the SuperBru leaderboards. Who will take the crown? Well, I tell you, there has been quite a development at the top of the table. And no, I know what you'll think. Cornflake has not gone to number 1. Not yet. Not this week anyway. But there's been a change. And there you have it. Look who's sitting at the top of the table after the quarter-final rounds. It is Nut 07. Well played, sir. Well played. I gave you the pressure chart task, although you probably didn't even see it, but I gave you the task, come on the task, to dislodge the driving maul. And Paul, I'm sorry to say, buddy, you are off the number 1 spot with just 3 games remaining. Driving maul falls down to number 2, but he is, only just over half a point behind Nut 07. Anti-Portal 49er fell down further places, pretty much doubling his position down to 6th, falling 3 spots, and it is in 10th position, up 5, Wakasa Duadua with the yellow cap. You see, we've already got, look, I'm prepared this time. I actually remember the yellow cap existed. Up to 10th is Mr. Wakasa Duadua. Big movers here through the teens as well. A lot of guys up 5, down 5, moving around 1s and 2s all over the shop. B Coventry with a big jump, up 10 alongside Bulldozer with the big star, up 8 spots. A few big drops down here as well. A lot of movement through the 20s and through the 30s. No one staying in their same spot. Not even good old me. Down in 43rd, but we've gone up 3 spots from before the quarterfinal. So I had a good round. I mean, I got 3 out of 4 games. I got a couple of margin points, if I'm not mistaken. Just missed out on getting the exact margin on one of the games as well. But all in all, I had a pretty good round. We see also above me by 1 place and by about 0.25 of a point is Taz87 with the wooden spoon falling down 3 spaces as well. Nate's as well falling down another 10. I'm going to pass you, Nate's. What are you doing, man? You can't get any lower than dropping below Cornflake. Brett Hartley, the arch rival, is also falling down 1 spot to 37th. But I've got a long way to go. 3 matches and 4 points behind good old Brett. I need some damn good picks in these last 2 rounds of the competition. Everyone else falls further down. No real movement down here in the 50s and 60s and below. But there we go. All sorts of mayhem going on in the predictor. How about the Fantasy League? Is that going to be a little bit more steady from what we've seen this season? I do expect it to be that way. And yep, unsurprisingly, it is still Sticky Toilet Actions who sits up the top with 4,865 points and 111 tries as well. I do notice that I'm pretty sure it's a new addition. The try tally on the right. He's the only guy to get over 110 tries. Pretty much one of the few guys to get in the hundreds. I think we've got the dangerous Jolsters down the bottom there in 12th who have 102. We have a double yellow cap winner this round with MFCFO's Blues and Nut 07's Western Dragons grabbing yellow cap. So it's a double yellow cap. We're throwing them away here, given yellow caps just about everyone, it seems. But the top 3 pretty much have stayed the same. No real change there at all. There's a bit of a closeness between the Infallible Mules and the Philanthropists between just, 3 points, which isn't much in a predictable fantasy rugby, I should say, when you've got your players and you've got to get the right try scorers, that sort of thing. So could be a change in second, but it looks unlikely anyone will dislodge the Toilet Boys in number 1. Further down the table we look, there's not as much movement here as there is in the predictor, but a lot of teams moving up and down. We get down, here's the business end. The All Flakes down in 34th. You know, considering I've hardly changed my team, I'm not too displeased about that. And we've got Brett's Western Sharks down there in 37th. He's moved up a spot as well, but he's still a good 150 points or so behind the All Flakes, which is top guns. Happy about that. No real big movers here, though. It's pretty much one up, one down. And, of course, Blues for days. Doing as well as the Blues. Still amazingly. Signed up for the league. Didn't even select one player. How do you sleep at night? How do you sleep at night with that sort of stuff going on? But there it is. There's the two SuperBru leagues as well. To the guys almost at the end. Good luck for the final couple of rounds. And we will see soon who will be the champion. Still trialing this sort of new format of doing it. I'm going to do it for the whole final series. I've had some good feedback from you guys. I've had some guys that refer just to general chats. As it is a time issue, having multiple guests on makes it a lot easier and possible, I'd say, to do it this way as well. To get the time to meet with all these guys, as well as everyone working and doing everything of a normal life, makes it a bit difficult to meet with 2-3 guys during a week. So this works. We get everyone's thoughts and opinions, so I hope you do like it enough and get that sort of rugby fix for the weekend. Of course, if you didn't have your say last week, do let me know in this video's comments what you think as well. Okay, so let's get into the rugby. The real reason why we're here. 2 matches, of course, coming up this weekend. And both of them, effectively, will be on Saturday night in their respective countries. The first one in New Zealand, the second one in South Africa. We've, of course, got the Crusaders versus the Hurricanes. That is in Christchurch, AMI Stadium, whatever they want to call it, Rugby League Stadium. It's got all sorts of names under the sun. Why, Crockett Stadium? Are they going to go back to that? Who knows? In Christchurch, Crusaders at home for semi-final number 1. And for semi-final number 2 is the Lions up against, the resurgent Waratahs. Second Force performances is their thing. That one is at Emirates Airlines Park, or as others may know it as Ellis Park in South Africa. Big matches, both huge games. Who will be the victors? That's what we're going to have a look at today and see who we think will come out on top. So let's meet the guests here for today. Of course, try to get as many on as we can, but available for this week, we have got the Scottish Cannon.
I was on last week for the quarterfinals, got 3 from 4 in my tips. The wildcard Juarez tip didn't go the way I wanted, but it's very, very interesting because my team's still in the competition, so I'm obviously very, very excited for the semi-finals, and they are mouth-watering semi-finals.
And Brett Hartley.
Cornflakes obviously asked me to be on here because I've streaked past him in SuperBru lately, so I think he needs all the help he can get. Poor man's dropping down pretty quickly.
So team, let's get into it. First match of course, the semi-final weekend will be the Crusaders up against the Hurricanes. I mean, a lot could go on in this one here. 2 teams, 2 of the best teams. Pretty much most people predicted either the Crusaders will win this or the Hurricanes. And I'm talking about the whole Super Rugby. Crusaders and Hurricanes have been the 2 biggest favourites since the start of the year. They clash semi-final time. Unfortunately, they won't meet in the New Zealand final, but this one could be a cracker. Who's got the upper edge here? Most of the form books will say the Crusaders, but what do you guys think?
Now, I'm going to take a bit of a wild card sort of picks in these in the 2 semi-finals here. I was 3 from 4 last week, as I said. This one's very hard to pick. It's pretty much the Super Rugby final. A lot of people say whoever wins this match is going to end up winning the final, and it's very hard to go past that. And, I thought the Hurricanes, after a very rough patch with both Barretts not really playing well at all, or not up to their usual standard. Let's not be too harsh, but not up to their usual standard. They still have that firepower in that entire backline. Lumape's been playing absolutely exhilarating, and Milner Scudder has been playing great as well, and obviously Ben Lamb, he's been scoring tries like anything. So the Hurricanes, their star-studded backline is making huge inroads, and they've got a pretty good forward pack as well. I think Arnie Savia is a good chance of being back this week. Brad Shields, obviously, and you've got a solid front row and a couple of big second rowers with Fafita in there. And, they're a very strong side. They're a very well-rounded side, and they remind me of the 2014 Super Rugby side of the Waratahs that ended up winning the comp. As for the Crusaders, they've only lost 2 games this season, and one of those games was against the Hurricanes. If you guys do remember that match in round 4 or 5 at Wellington, at Westpac Stadium. And you know what? I'm very excited for this one because it's very unpredictable. A lot of people are like, the Crusaders are a sure thing for the Super Rugby Championship, the Super Rugby final. But you know what? I am chucking a wild card pick in there. I am got to stick with my tip from the start of the year. I said the Hurricanes from the start of the year were going to win the Super Rugby competition. I got the Six Nations right 2 years in a row, and I think I've got a good chance of getting the Super Rugby right this year again. Hopefully, I mean, if I pick the Super Rugby winner, there's pretty much no point watching the entire season. But I'm going to pick the Hurricanes because I don't want to see another Crusaders-Lions final again. Secondly, I do think the Hurricanes have more firepower if they are playing their best than the Crusaders. I think a lot of people aren't going to argue with that. I think TJ Perinara, Bo Barrett, they've got a absolutely star-studded team that the Hurricanes, when they kick into gear, are pretty much unstoppable. And if they play their best in Christchurch, the Crusaders are not going to keep up with them because there is so much firepower within that Hurricane side. And I've got to go on potential. Form ultimately does get thrown out the window sometimes when it comes to finals. Waratahs lost to the Brumbies coming in to the finals. The Canes were going through a very, very rough patch. The Chiefs were on form but ended up getting knocked out. So form is not too important when it comes to the Super Rugby finals. It's one match. It's 80 minutes. If you win that match, you get through to the final. It's quite simple. If you're up for the match, you're going to do it. Thing is, both sides have got champion winning players in their sides. So both teams, both players, everyone within that lineup knows how to win the Super Rugby Championship pretty much, and they know how to win big games. So it's going to be an absolutely exhilarating match. I'm going to go the Hurricanes by 4 points. I think they're going to cause an upset and throw a spanner in the works. And I've got to stick with my start of the year pick because I feel like I'll be bad. I feel like I'll be a hypocrite if I don't stick with it. So that's my pick. Hurricanes by 4 points, causing a bowl over in Christchurch.
First of all, I've got to touch on it. The Crusaders absolutely wiped the floor with my Sharks last week. Very painful game to watch for me. The Sharks were very technically poor, and the Crusaders just capitalised on that. If you can't win your own lineup against the Crusaders, and you try to maul from the Crusaders 22, when the Crusaders been probably the best lineup sacking team in the whole competition, you're just not going to go anywhere, and the Sharks didn't, and the Crusaders put on a clinic and put the Sharks away quite easily. There was probably times, sort of beginning of the second half, we thought the Sharks might edge back into it, but Crusaders snuffed the Sharks out pretty quickly after that. The Hurricanes coming off a pretty close win against the Chiefs. Obviously, the scoreboard at the end should have been a bit bigger. The Chiefs scoring right at the end, sort of consolation, try to make it just within 1 point at the end, but very close encounter with the Chiefs, coming off their second game straight in a row with them. They'll be happy with that win, but yeah, now they go to Christchurch and they play the big boys in the Crusaders. They've been the bench, the benchmark team the whole year. They've been incredible. They've got such a deep team, such a great team, and even times where stars like Moanga wasn't there. They powered through that, and they got through those times with their deep bench. And they've been showing especially this whole second half of the season, where they've clung on to that first position on the ladder, and I think their points difference right now is about over 200 at this stage. So absolutely dominating the competition, and I think they are the favourites. The Hurricanes, I wouldn't put them out of the game at any stage. They've got one of the most star-studded backlines I think we've ever seen in Super Rugby. The Barrett brothers are just always so dangerous. And Julian Savier's wrapping up his last few games with the Hurricanes as well, which would be a big inspiration for them to win this game and move on to the final to give him one more game, even though he hasn't been the most consistent player by any shot. I think he has got some pretty big relationships in that team, and they'll want to play for him and give him at least 2 more games in the yellow jersey. So I think anyone could win this game. Conditions, I think if it's a wet game, we've seen in clashes between these two teams before, when it's wet, the Crusaders always have the advantage with the style of play. They're different. The contrast in their two styles of plays. The Crusaders obviously can be a lot more tactical with their kicking, a lot more precise. Their touch kicking against the Sharks is phenomenal. on the weekend. They absolutely kicked the Sharks to pieces, with just some flawless kicking, especially from their halves combination. So if they do that against the Hurricanes and the Hurricanes allow them to gain so much ground off touch kicks, then the Hurricanes are going to be in a lot of trouble, and they've got to limit that. And Geordie Barrett especially has to cover pretty well at the back. But the Hurricanes, if it's good running conditions, the Hurricanes backline should deliver. What their potential is. But at the end of the day, I think the Crusaders are just the far superior team. They one of the most well-coached sides in the comp, and I think they're just going to deliver in that. And a nice home game for them. Hopefully, they get a bigger crowd than they did last week. Very, very disappointing crowd last week. So hopefully, those people in Christchurch get up and go support their team. So my final prediction for this will be Crusaders by 4. So a nice close one. Hopefully, we're in store for a cracker.
Now, I read a piece, I think coming from the Herald here in New Zealand, about this matchup, and it says the statistics say the Crusaders will win. History says the Crusaders will win. Recent form says the Crusaders will win. The presence of so many All Blacks says the Crusaders will win. It's stating the obvious, isn't it? Very much so stating the obvious, but it is stating what is very, very true. Everything about this game points to a Crusaders victory. Unfortunately, we don't have either of these sides to have a look at to really pinpoint areas, but you say the way the side's been going, they'll be playing pretty much full strength bar injuries that have been out for absolutely decades. So for these sides, key men are going to be there. The Barretts are going to be there. The key guys in the Crusaders, which pretty much their whole pack, is going to be there. Everyone in a Crusaders jumper is pretty key. But for these two sides, you've got to look at it and say Crusaders big favourites going into this clash. The deciding factor is going to be who can make the big plays. And I'm talking about one man that is going to be the possible difference of the Hurricanes actually winning this game is one man. And that is Beauden Barrett, who has been, yes, we'll say, decidedly average in the last few weeks, especially since the June break, has not been anywhere near his best. But if his side is going to have any sniff of a chance to get anything off this Crusaders team, he's going to need to be the key man playing in yellow. Yes, he's got a good squad around him. He's got players who can create and X-Factor guys that can change a game. Yes, there's no question about that. But Beauden Barrett is the key for me for this Hurricane side to really take anything. We're going to see a typical Crusaders performance. And at this time of the season, this is when they really knuckle down and do that Crusader stuff very, very well. They grind teams down. We've seen it in crunch matches throughout this season. They like to build up. They like to dominate. They play a very good territorial game. They pin teams back. They make them do a lot of hard work to get out of their 22, a lot of hard work on defense. And eventually, it fully tells when you get to the hour mark or past that sort of stage. That is when they attack. And that is when they become deadly, when the team is almost out on its feet. The Crusaders very rarely ever do what the Chiefs have done for the last couple of rounds before they got knocked out. They just blitz from the start. They score 1 million tries and they're ahead by 40 points at halftime. We've seen that against the Highlanders and we see them do that against the Hurricanes as well. But you're not going to see the Crusaders do that. They'll grind this one away as they always do and as they always have done. And that is their ticket to victory. Now, you've got to remember as well that the only 2 games the Crusaders have lost this season was against the Hurricanes and the Highlanders. So that's going to come into this game a little bit, I'd imagine, mentally, is something that the Hurricanes would like to get to G themselves up. Something that they'd like to get into their heads and they could potentially take to them onto the field. I think for the Crusaders, they've got to do the opposite of what the Hurricanes need to do. So the Hurricanes need to get Barrett into the game, involved in creating as much as possible. Crusaders, they've just got to shut them down. And yes, we all know they've got the Laumapes who can create. They've got the Geordie Barretts that can create. They've got the Savias and Lambs, if they start on those 2 wings, that can create. And they can force things to happen through the way that they play. But no one is going to tear a game to shreds quite like the skill of Beauden Barrett. If he is, like I said, shut down, if their forward pack goes backwards, that is going to have a massive influence on this game. But of course, remember, the Hurricanes have beaten the Crusaders this season already. Will we see a repeat of that in the semi-final? That is what they have to take hold of and pretty much replicate. They have to replicate that style, that sort of match to get the result here over the Crusaders. I think based off what everyone else has said, my thoughts on the game as well. I won't go on for these games too long or else we're going to have a monster episode like always. But long and short, that is ultimately what I think this game is going to come down to. One team trying to make a player involved as possible, the other trying to stop him getting into the game. Beauden Barrett, he's not World Player of the Year for nothing. He is a guy that can change the game. But I don't think the Hurricanes are going to get that done. I do think the Crusaders will come out on top of this one, but it is going to be close, going to be exciting, and it's going to be thrilling rugby that hopefully will lead the Crusaders to victory. That is my pick. Crusaders by 4 and into the grand final versus who? Lions or Waratahs? Well, we'll take a look at that game next, but this should be a great little matchup as well. Home advantage is a big thing as well for this Crusader side, who have not left here since coming back from the international break. So that's massive for them. And the Hurricanes obviously travelling down to Christchurch, where to have a bumper crowd. I expect, we didn't see the quarterfinals. Is everyone saving their money for the grand final? Well, I'd hope not, but hopefully we'll have a good crowd down there for the semi-final in Christchurch for the Crusaders. +4, I've got them over the Hurricanes. Right, on to our second and final match. It feels very weird to say that, doesn't it? Lions up against the Waratahs. A miraculous display by the Waratahs against the Highlanders, but can they do it twice in a row, as well as travelling across to South Africa to one of the toughest places to play? Do they have it in them again?
Jeez, this is a very tough one. The Lions, last time they played the Waratahs was a 29-0 drubbing, and that was at Allianz Stadium in Sydney. And the Lions were far from a full-strength side then. The Lions have got one of the biggest, forward packs in the competition. Their scrum is absolutely phenomenal. The rolling ball when that gets going is absolutely phenomenal. And for the Waratahs, who have got a very mobile forward pack, they don't have the big bodies like 2014 with Will Skelton in there. And, it's a very lean forward pack. You don't have a lot of advantage line runners due to the big bodies. And that's might ultimately be the Waratahs' downfall here. The last time in Sydney, Malcolm Marx played phenomenally. He got over the ball so many times at the breakdown that the Waratahs couldn't move him off of it. And he did that last week against the Hawaras, and he showed you the pace that he had with that 50-meter intercept he got, which was phenomenal after the Hawaras threw a wild pass. So Malcolm Marx continues to be one of the best players in the world. Elton Yankees is kicking phenomenally well as well. He was having a field day up in altitude last weekend. And I'm very interested to see what the Lions are going to do here. They know how to beat the Waratahs. They have done so the last couple times at Johannesburg. They also beat them in Sydney this year. And ultimately, the Waratahs have got pretty much everything against them. Their starts recently have been absolutely terrible. They've had to fly over to South Africa. They're still got their captain out. I don't think Michael Hooper's playing this week. And, they are a side that plays on confidence. If that 9, 10, 12, and 15 combination isn't working, the Waratahs are terrible. One of the worst teams in the comp. If that 9, 10, 12, 15 combination is firing, they are the best team in the comp when it comes to attack. And their defense needs to be on point. Now, I honestly don't know which way I really want to go here, because obviously my heart is saying the Waratahs, but my head is saying the Lions. And it's very hard to go past the Lions at home, making their third consecutive Super Rugby final. It's very hard to go against the Lions. And I'm not going to go against the Lions, because I've got to use my head on this. I think the Lions, even though I don't want to say it, are going to get over the line against the Waratahs by 6 points. And it's going to be a cracking match. Both backlines are going to be on point. We're going to see a lot of points. I don't think we're going to see a similar match to the 29-point drubbing. It's going to be close. And Israel Folau, Curtly Beale, and Bernard Foley need to fire if the Waratahs are going to be within this match. If not, the Lions are going to run away with it, because they've got the bigger bodies, they've got the more solid scrum, they've got the better set piece, and ultimately there's only so far pure X factor and talent catch you, which the Waratahs have relied on a lot this season. But let me know what you think, because it's exciting Super Rugby finals. You've got all three nations or traditional Super Rugby nations still in the comp. It's not all New Zealand semi-finals, which is always great. We're going to have a New Zealand versus either Australia or South Africa finals, so that's always interesting as well. And I cannot wait for the next couple of weeks. Hopefully the Waratahs can push along and cause an upset. But it's very hard to tip against the Lions in Johannesburg when they have been playing some great rugby in the last couple of weeks. Going to be very interested to see. Let me know what you think below. Again, it's been a pleasure to be on Cornflake's channel, and I can't wait for the Super Rugby finals in the coming weekend.
Waratahs comeback kings, I suppose, from last week. Down 24 points to 6 or something at halftime, and I don't know what Darrell Gibson said at halftime, and I don't know what sort of demon sorcery they pulled off during the halftime break in that locker room, but they sure came back, and their stars started to fire. Nayavora getting that intercept, that crucial intercept, saving a probably certain try. I think it was 4-on-2 or 5-on-2 at that stage in the right hand corner, and he saved it very well. He intercepted it. It's the only thing he could do. He rushed him and pinned the ball off, and then after that, you guys like Foley, Beale, and Folau. The Highlanders just let them get in the game last week, and it punished them. That combination was absolutely deadly. Nick Phipps putting a lot of work as well, and he's copped a lot of flack this year, and he had a pretty solid performance. But at the same time, I'd say the Highlanders also choked. They should have iced that game a long time ago. Having a margin like that, although it should have been bigger, they should have iced that game and not allowed you guys like Israel Folau to get in the game. And their defense just fell to pieces in that second half. So Waratahs sort of weathered the perfect storm in that second half. They got their stars into the game, and the Highlanders just stopped defending, full stop. So full credit to them for getting that big win. But it's a tough ask this week against the Lions, obviously having to travel to the Highveld in South Africa at altitude. Long old flight from Sydney to Johannesburg as well. So it's always a factor, especially in these playoffs. Jet lag is always a huge factor. You sort of saw it with the Jags last week. They travel the most out of any team in the comp, and you could see sort of that fatigue start to wear on with them when they lost to the Lions last week. Lions pretty solid performance last week as well. It's pretty standard for them of what we've come to expect from them over the last 3 or 4 seasons, and they deliver on that. Plain and simple. They've worked pretty well to get that second spot, get a nice home semi-final, and they've set themselves up pretty well for winning against the Waratahs. And for the Waratahs, it just hinges on their star players again. Your Foleys, your Beals, and your Falaus. That's pretty much what it comes down to for the Tars. And if those guys fire like they did last week, I'd give them a pretty fair chance against the Lions. The Lions haven't been as good this year as they have previous seasons. They obviously walked through the South African Conference, but the South African Conference, aside from the Jags and the Lions, was pretty shoddy this year as well. So that wasn't the toughest of tasks for them, but they topped it and looked the goods for a lot of the season. So I think this game's going to come down to the Lions just having that home ground advantage. Hopefully Ellis Park will be quite full this weekend. Will be the Lions. You would think it would be the Lions' last game this season should the Crusaders win against the Hurricanes, but nothing's certain. We might even have a final in Sydney next week. Who knows? But the Lions definitely the favourite, and I've got them as favourites. So I've got Lions by 10 points. It could be a lot bigger and also could be a lot smaller. I wouldn't discount the Tars by any means. I think, like I said, if those stars start to fire, the Lions could find themselves a little bit of strife. So we'll have to see how the Lions deal with it and what Waratahs team we see turn up. They've been very good, especially the second half of the season. So, Lions by 10 is my final score for that game.
Okay, we can put this one quickly in a nutshell and just go, this is going to be a stretch too far for the Waratahs. See, you've got to give these guys credit, though. Let's take it back a week and say how ridiculous it is that they're even at this point after being absolutely demolished by the Highlanders in the first 40 minutes and then completely reversing the roles and demolishing a stupidly poor Highlanders team in the second half. Now, the Waratahs need to remember that they were stupidly bad in the first half. If they take that in any way to South Africa, they're done. I can't see any other side giving them that second chance like the Highlanders did, expecting that they're still going to get the results. I think the Highlanders are probably a little bit complacent in this game, probably coming into it, they're a little, just a little bit probably overconfident. Half time without dominating, they're probably like, yep, boys, let's pack the bags, we're off to Africa. Wasn't to be. And got to credit the Waratahs for how they played. They were fantastic as well. For the Lions and for every South African franchise this season, home advantage is the most important. Now, for me, the way this competition is going, it's going to be, if the Crusaders win, they will be champions. I have no doubt about that whatsoever. If the Hurricanes win their game, we're off to Africa. And whoever's off to Africa changes the whole complex of this. It will be the third season in a row, potentially, that the Lions will be grand finalists, and they still have yet to put a title to their name. Mentally, that is a burden. Now, if they've got the Hurricanes coming over to visit, they could really change things for them, and it could be a big boost, but I just don't see they're going to come to Christchurch either and get a big victory. They did very, very well against the Jaguares, but as we've seen, with that match-up between those two sides, the home team always wins, and that's the way it's always been, and that is the way it continues to be as well. They put in a good display with the Jaguares as well. I mean, they just don't seem to win on South African soil, and as for the South African franchises, they win when they're at home as well. Very rarely we've seen a South African side lose at home against another South African team or an Australian team as well. The Waratahs have the ability to stick with the game. I've said it all season long. They've got a tenacious attitude where they seem to just stick with the game enough. Even though they seem like they're playing terribly, they always seem to be in the mix. They always seem to be one or two good plays, like we've seen against the Highlanders, away from completely turning the game on its head and changing the whole outlook of the game. So the Lions have to do one thing, and that is not sleep at all on this one. They cannot afford to not off for even 10 minutes, or the game could change. The Waratahs have that ability to just change things in a flash. So that is what they've got to be careful of. The Lions are a very, very good side. Love to attack. I'd imagine it should be pretty good, solid weather out there as well in Africa for this game. So it should suit the Lions. And in areas where the Waratahs would struggle in the pack especially, I can see that the Lions will definitely take a good piece of domination here over this Waratahs side. More so than we've seen from the Highlanders the week before. So all points here are heading towards the Lions for me. Waratahs, yes, very good. Played exceptionally well last week. They've looked by far one of the best, or the best side out of Australia, but definitely looking like one of the better sides in the competition when they are on point. When they're not, they look terrible. And that's what they have to avoid doing at all costs. If they go into that sort of crappy game plan that we've seen first half versus the Highlanders or that full 80 against the Brumbies, they are going to get destroyed. But you've got to pile on to that the fact that they're going to Africa again. That is going to be a massive thing. Turnaround of a week over to Africa, play a semi-final. I mean, this Lions fans will be desperate. They're desperate as well. And they'll be wanting to back their team to another grand final. Prediction for me, Crusaders versus Lions grand final for 2018. That one, at this stage, seems a little bit too easy to predict, but the Lions, definitely one of the better sides out of Africa as well, and you've got to say, worthy from what they've done this season to get to this position, although you've got to say, would have they beaten the Hurricanes? And that is a big, big question if they don't make it as well. But that is the preview for the semi-final round of Super Rugby 2018. Hope you've all enjoyed over the last few weeks of playoffs rugby, as I said at the start too. Still trialing this sort of new format of doing it. I'm going to do it for the whole final series. I've had some good feedback from you guys. I've had some guys that prefer just the general chats. As it is a time issue, having multiple guests on makes it a lot easier and possible, I'd say, to do it this way as well. To get the time to meet with all these guys as well as everyone working and doing everything of a normal life, makes it a bit difficult to meet with 2-3 guys during a week. So this works. We get everyone's thoughts and opinions, so I hope you do like it enough and get that sort of rugby fix for the weekend. Of course, if you didn't have your say last week, do let me know in this video's comments what you think as well. But until the grand final preview next week, where there will just be 2 teams going into one match, that is what we're all here for, to crown the champions. Until then, thank you all for tuning and watching. Hope you've enjoyed, and I'll see you all next week for the grand final. Until then, take care.